Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We're going to go ahead and jump into our questions here. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 10, dealing with our last two plagues before the final event in Egypt, and it's the plagues of locusts and darkness. And as I said, in Exodus chapter 10. So let's go and jump into the questions real quick. We'll go back to Mark 1, where Jesus healed the praise. How was Jesus teaching different from the teachers of the law? Mark 1:22.
With authority, not like the scribe.
Exactly. So he's teaching with one with authority, where the other ones were just reading basically what was in the law. The Jews had teaching, and he had the authority to teach because it was his words. All right, next one. Cain kills Abel. We go back to Genesis 4. Name the first three children of Adam and Eve. Cain, Abel, Seth. Exactly right. What did Cain say when God asked him where Abel was? Genesis 4:9. Very familiar line, exactly right. Am I my brother's keeper? So, you mean, really, should I know where he's at? I mean, of course you know where he's at. You're going to kill him. When you see that. So it brings us on to the next question. Exodus 5. Let my people go. Why did Moses and Aaron tell Pharaoh that he should let God's people leave? Exactly, so they could go worship, sacrifice to God. We see they would go 3 days out to do so, so they were out of the land of Egypt when they did this. So what did Pharaoh, though, say about the Lord during this conversation? Exodus 5, 1 through 3.
Who is he that I should obey him?
Yeah, who is this guy that I should obey him? I mean, give me a break. I mean, I can see Pharaoh thinking like this, you know how many gods there are in the world? Why would I obey your God? What is the reason for that? And he just, at this point, still doesn't understand that he is the God of all these other so-called gods are just human-made, nothing to him. Which brings us to Exodus 6 and 7. God begins to perform signs before Moses. According to God, when would Pharaoh let the Israelites leave Egypt? Exodus 6:1. It was an event that would take place.
When he brought the children out from under the bondage of the Egyptians.
When he brought the children out of them, exactly right. So according to God, when Pharaoh, would Pharaoh let the Israelites leave Egypt? And we know, of course, he's not going to do that. And we know that he would do it when after, of course, we know the firstborn of all things would die, except for the Israelites. I mean, they counted to them too. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. Very important to get that. Remember, God, has started allowing these plagues, no longer to affect the Israelites. But the very last one, everyone says, oh, it affected everybody, the Israelites. No, they had to do something to obey God to not let it happen in their household or to their animals. So we see that exactly right about the children leaving there, as we would find. Which brings us to Exodus 7:5. Yes or no? Would the Egyptians learn who is the Lord?
Yes.
They would. They would come to an understanding without a doubt. Exodus 8, plague frogs and lice and flies. Where were the frogs during the plague of Egypt?
All of them.
Very simple, exactly right. Everywhere. You could not go somewhere and hide from these frogs. I mean, they knew the best hiding places, really, when it came down to what we see. And then finally, could Pharaoh's magicians make frogs? Yes, they were able to make frogs, of course, with the help of God in that process. And then Exodus 8:16. What happened in Egypt when God told Moses to have Aaron strike the dust on the ground with his staff? What did all the dust do?
It brought up the lice.
Turned into lice. Imagine as much dust there was in Egypt. Think about that. And there would be that much lice, just like every dust you would see. It's just remarkable. And finally, Exodus 9, plagues of livestock, boils, and hail that we looked at on Wednesday night. During the plague, how many Egyptian livestock, very important question, in the field died? All of them, exactly right. Now, could they do something to not have their livestock die? Could have brought them in, exactly right, because the health was dropping, but they didn't believe in this God, so why should they follow him? And they see that was a huge mistake. And then Exodus 9:8, what did God have Moses and Aaron do to cause the plague of boils on man and beast? Something they did in front of Pharaoh.
Got the hand of ashes out of the furnace and throw them up towards heaven.
Exactly. Got ash from the furnace, and I love that because it's out of the furnace that they were making bricks with. It's all their hard work. that they were doing, and threw it in the air, and we know that immediately we see and understand that Pharaoh receives boils, so do the magicians, and everybody else throughout the land, except for that of the Israelites, is what we're told. Which now brings us to Exodus chapter 10. Exodus chapter 10, we're going to deal with what we would call the locusts and darkness. And I'm telling you what, the locusts are, everybody understands locusts. And, we hear them, from, most years. And even though they said they only traveled like every 3 or 4 years, whatever, I don't know why we're hearing them every year then. There's not much to them when you really think about them. But locusts, as you would see, the real locusts, and locusts, especially back on the European side of the world and so on, they're huge. I mean, they get very, very big. And they look they look kind of more like, I think, like a big grasshopper, but they still have that bulging body turning, as you would see with the locusts. So as the battle between Moses and Pharaoh draws to a close, there are several things changing. Several things are going to change in the way Moses talks to Pharaoh, the way Pharaoh listens to Moses, just some things that are going on. And so we'll see the 2 of the final 3 plagues, locusts and darkness. And, how many times, we think about this, how many times was Moses and Aaron confront Pharaoh on this problem, on letting his people go? How often do we, like Pharaoh, maybe ourselves even, maybe this happens from time to time, refuse to listen when God is trying to get our attention? And, it's very important, brethren, we have something happen in our life that continues. God, more or less, especially if you're a Christian, God's trying to get your attention, and we need to really pay attention to that. And that's what we see here, that Pharaoh and them did not. As we know, of course, Israel has, and so has Moses and Aaron. But in Exodus 10, it's a continuation of the struggle, not just between Moses and Pharaoh, but between pride and surrender. That's what this is about here, between God's purpose and human's resistance. And knowing that Pharaoh's heart, it's mentioned many times, remains hardened. And Egypt, not just Pharaoh, remember, Egypt pays the price for this. All those people that live there pay the price because of one man's stubbornness, one man's pride, as we see this happening. But of course, woven in this chapter is also a very powerful reminder that God is sovereign. God is sovereign. We have to get that. But He's also very more. God's not only sovereign, but He's also patient. The Bible talks about Him being long-suffering. He's been very long-suffering throughout all this time, but He's determined to let His people go free, and it's going to happen. So these plagues, they're different, and there's a purpose in the difference, what we're going to see today. And Moses' actions toward Pharaoh are different also, as I stated in the beginning. So we'll look at it as we go through this. Dad, do you have a comment? Go ahead.
Just a quick comment. When you mentioned about Pharaoh being the one who made the decision and how to affect others, that's what happens with sin. Many times we think it just affects us, but it doesn't.
Right.
It affects everybody.
Yep, it does. And then we'll talk about a little bit in here. It affects those maybe that we love and we care for, those maybe we just know, or maybe people we don't know at all. It'll affect them, and because they may be looking at us in ways we don't know. For an example, and so on. So it's real important to get that and understand that we are a living example for God and Christ and for others around us. Which brings us to this area here, knowing that God's patience in the face of rebellion. I mean, it amazes me how patient God is. And chapters like this, we usually, of course, look at all the plagues, and we look at Pharaoh, we really pay attention to all that. But it's a great story on the patience of God, a long-suffering God. If you have people that haven't obeyed the gospel yet, or if you know others that just not living a Christian life, and you want them to, and you're doing everything in your power to be that great example and so on, understand that God is long-suffering. God has patience. He wants everybody to come to Him. If He knows, just from what we see in the example, some of that, that's just your interpretation. From what we see in the Bible and examples, if there was one person left on this earth, everybody else was not, there were yet Christians and everybody else wasn't doing right, but there was one person thinking about the truth. Just they haven't responded yet. Don't you think God's going to give them an opportunity? Of course He is. And that's what we see about God, and that's where this is at. So let's jump into Genesis. Don't go to Genesis. Exodus chapter 10. Before we do that, Dad, go ahead and comment.
I cannot remember, but I don't think there's anything that tells us what the length of these plagues were, because God is long-suffering. Some of these things may have had to take some amount of time.
Well, we know they did, because we hear them sometimes, say tomorrow, and then we know, as it says about how long they lasted. Sometimes it was there's something there about a week that we can read about, so we don't know how long it was. But remember, Moses went in there thinking, it's going to be a day or two job, I'm going to get done, come home. And, and there's a lot involved in this here. It's not only God's patience we're finding, but Moses has learned patience. He really has. And we saw him in the beginning, and he's changed so much. And what a great teaching to him, because he's going to need it over the next 40 years, isn't he? I mean, without a doubt, he's going to need it. So let's go ahead and read Exodus 10, 1 through 2, and see what we find. If someone will read that for us, please.
Now the Lord said to Moses, Go and do Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, and I may show these signs of mine before him, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and your son's son the mighty things I have done in Egypt, and my signs which I have done among them, that you may know that I am God.
Thank you. So we've seen the progression of the hardening here. First, we know that Pharaoh, hardened his own heart. Then it talks about God participating in with this, involved in hardening the heart of Pharaoh. Not that God is evil in any way whatsoever, but the way God knew what was going to happen, what needed to be done to harden his heart, because it was just going to keep getting harder and harder, without a doubt. And remember, God very well told Moses, tell Pharaoh, it's because of me that you are where you are. I brought you up. And he brought him up for this purpose, knowing that this is the way this Pharaoh would be. And it would be a perfect opportunity and time to teach everybody who he was. So God, does this final hardening is what we see here at this end, because of the situations of how bad it's going to get for these people. Pharaoh has made his decision, and there's no going back now. It's what's interesting now. At this point, the difference is each time God has kind of given him an opportunity to turn and to change. That's done. You're getting these plagues regardless of what it sounds like when we read this here. And so at this point in everyone's life, they have to make a decision. Pharaoh needs to make a decision. And just like you and I today, we need to make a decision in our lives, whether we want our hearts right with God or against God. We have to make that choice. And so there are three reasons given for this, what's going on here with Pharaoh, and what we see even what deals with things with us today, I guess you'd say. Number one is to show God's great signs. He wanted everybody to know that he was the God. He wanted everybody to know that there's no other God to stand against him. That's why when he's doing these plagues, it's against gods that Pharaoh looked at as gods. All of Egypt did. Number two, to have stories of God's greatness to pass on. Notice what he said. He wanted to pass on a generation, a generation, a generation. Look where we are today. How many thousands of years removed from this moment, and we still talk about it. We talk about what is there. And then finally, so that they will know who God is and who is not God. It's little, there's difference to show God, great signs, show him what he can do. But he wants them to know, look, I am the only God. There is no other God. And God's making this point. He does say there's no other God than me. He's saying there's no other God at all. And people need to get that, because everything's human-made. So in a sense, this is not unlike the situation. Even when you come to the hardness of these people, you think back a little closer in time to us. I'd say a little closer, 2,000 years difference. Think about Jesus' time here on earth. The Israelites, their hearts hardened around Jesus is what happened. They were told he was going to come. The Messiah was going to be there one day, the Savior. And that they knew all the signs. Here's what's interesting. They knew the signs that were supposed to happen. And Jesus met all those signs, those prophecies that came about. But those people were I would say, just as bad as Pharaoh in this point, because if not worse, because they knew the truth, and they decided not to follow it and to follow something different. So here we are, brethren, 2,000 years from that, and we still deal with the same thing in our life today. It's just remarkable. So the purpose and the process, as we see as we go through this, is to just never delay to do right by God. Let me just say that. If something goes on in your life, make sure you're right with God and take care of it as we see this happening. So I want us to notice now how Moses deals with Pharaoh. As I said, that they're going to change here. And I want you to see how they change. Where's my picture? Well, what happened to my picture? Okay, I had a really cool picture there. It was a picture of Pharaoh with a heart coming out of him. It was really neat. I guess the internet decided I didn't need it. I don't know. But the high cost of what should be somewhere else just in the middle of the picture. The high cost of a hardened heart. Exodus 10, 3 through 20. If someone go and read that for us, please.
So Moses and Aaron came into Pharaoh and said to him, Thus says the Lord God of the Hebrews, How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. Or else if you refuse to let my people go, Behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory, and they shall cover the face of the earth, that no one will be able to see the earth. And they shall eat the residue of what is left, which remains to you from the hail, and they shall eat every tree which grows up for you out of the field. They shall fill your houses, the houses of all your servants, and the houses of all the Egyptians, which neither your fathers nor your fathers' fathers have seen, since the day that they were on the earth to this day. And he turned and went out from Pharaoh.
Thank you. So, you see the difference in this one from the other ones? What's the difference here? Anybody see it? Notice what happens. Moses doesn't ask, we'll do this, or else if you let my people go, this is going to happen. Moses just walks in this time and says, this is what's happening, goodbye, and just walks out the door. I mean, think about that one. You know, Pharaoh's expecting another conversation, you know, another, yeah, I'm tired of hearing you. Here's Pharaoh. I mean, Moses is just going to town with all, and then imagine like, okay, and it just walks out. I mean, leaves, shows him his back, and he's done. So in other words, God is done playing with Pharaoh. He's done, you know, going back and forth with these thoughts of what's there and so on. Remember, I'll just do this before we go farther. Remember God with Abraham? Remember God with Abraham when he came to the land of Sodom? You know, Sodom and Gomorrah. You know God said, I'm going to destroy it. And remember, Abraham kept going back and forth. What if there's 50 faithful people? What if there's 40? What if there's 30? And God kept going because God knew there was only one really when it came down to it. And we see this as we find this happening, even though 3 of them came out. The 4th did it, his wife, of course. She turned to salt. And so we see this happening. But what I want us to get at is understand, this isn't anything new to God, even though this is, you know, with man. Humans have always been like this. We saw it in the Garden of Eden. We saw it with Cain. Remember with Abel? Who am I? You know, I'm not supposed to, you know, my brother's keeper, what do you think? And we see all this happening. So here, you know, God is used to this. And we get here that Moses simply gives the ultimatum. He does no bargaining with Pharaoh. And that was the time of the overwhelming strength to be shown on God's part. Long ago are the days, I guess you would say, when Pharaoh's weak magicians thought they could actually do something to show who they were. And these were no longer warning shots. I mean, those other ones, those were kind of what we call warning shots over the bow. You know, getting ready for this moment. And now God is playing for keeps. He's done. And so these plagues aren't for Pharaoh's benefit. They're one thing and one thing only, and that's to show who the boss is. And that's God. And we see this. And after making, and it's very important also, is someone saying, well, that's a pretty mean boss. No, he's not, because he's doing this to protect and to set free slaves, to set free these servants that are there under the bondage of Egypt. And that's a great thing that God is willing to do that. So the failure here, you know, Moses leaves and Pharaoh, and you know, you wonder what Pharaoh thought about that situation there. He's like, he's going to bring what? Locusts. You know, we already said a moment ago how sandy and how dirt-ridden, you know, Egypt is. Imagine if there's no vegetation at all. Imagine what that place was like. You know, vegetation does more than just feed us or grow. It holds dirt down. And a lot of people don't think about it. It holds it down. When you don't have that, you have dust storms. Huge dust storms. You know, just talking to anybody who's living in the panhandle of Texas or Oklahoma, you know, during the dirty 30s, or even, you know, in my lifetime, I've seen it up there, and it's just remarkable. So here we go to this. Here we go to verse 7. It's just going to explain what's about to happen. So we'll go ahead and read this for us.
And Pharaoh's servant said to him, how long shall this man be a snare to us? Let the men go, that they may serve the Lord their God. Do you not yet know that Egypt is destroyed?
Thank you. So here's a couple things going on in this verse here. How long shall this man be a snare to us? It's interesting with this point. You notice it doesn't just say servants. And this is interesting because you would have usually other Egyptians, the magicians, maybe talking back to Pharaoh. But now you have servants that are actually speaking to Pharaoh like he's a regular, everyday guy. I mean, remember, it wasn't the thing you did. He's supposed to be a god and so on. And they're like, and I love how they say it. They said, Egypt's already gone. It's gone. It's horrible. It's terrible. Why are you letting this happen? But something else is very important here. I want you to notice this right here. It says, how long shall this man? Notice it says, let the men go. Now, usually in the Bible, a lot of times when it says the word men, we think that's just the way they're leaving the women out. that's not the way this reads here in the Hebrew. This is actually meaning only the men. No women, no children, and even no animals, which is crazy because that's the main purpose they're leaving there, is to sacrifice to God. And this is the same idea. Remember, same idea in chapter 7. Pharaoh said the same thing. So they knew the men would not leave, guess what, without their families. It's just not going to happen. All the Pharaoh is trying to do, once again, Pharaoh and the servants now, they're seeing this too, is afraid if they leave for 3 days out, they're not going to what? They're not going to come back. But if you leave just the men, yeah, of course they're going to come back for the families and so on. But what do you think Moses is going to do? You think Moses is going to be like, oh, this will be a great thing, when that comes back? Not at all. That's not going to happen whatsoever. What's that?
He's not going to bargain with them.
He's done bargaining. And remember, it's not Moses coming up with these ideas or these thoughts. Remember, God is talking to Moses. Moses is telling Aaron, and Aaron is speaking these words to Pharaoh. But notice occasionally, now we're hearing Moses actually talking, which is also very important to see here, how much he's growing through this process. So, you and I, same thing today, this is for us, think about this. How often do we want to escape problems, maybe even problems of our own doing, in this life, but don't realize they have come upon us, and that we know, basically maybe we've sinned against God, and we just don't realize it, but we see things going on, we need to figure that out. We need to know, when we're living for God and when we're not. We should be able to understand that. And so here comes this next point, chapter 10, verses 8 through 11, and it's dealing with partial obedience. See, partial obedience, brethren, is literally disobedience. That's all it is. Someone say, well, I obey God. Most of it I obey God by. God doesn't work that way. In other words, there are no gray areas in the Bible. We have to be very careful with that. It's black and white, it's very clear, and we see that. And so this is what we're going to see in these verses. Dad, go ahead.
Jennifer just made a comment, if you want to read that.
Let me see. Did you already read it?
Yeah, I've read it.
Okay. Let me go back. Jennifer Underwood, she's homesick right now. She said, this story is a testament to listen to and obeying God. Under Joseph's Pharaoh, God blessed Egypt richly because they obeyed God. Under Moses' Pharaoh, Egypt was completely devastated because he did not obey God. That's exactly right. And that's what we're seeing this here, this obedience, and disobedience. And can we say it's any different in our life today?
Sure.
No. Can we say it's different? Does God work any different than he did back then? No, not at all. Obedience is what he expects. Partial obedience is disobedience. So let's go and see what it says. Let's read verses 8 through 11. And we're going to find out here that Moses and Aaron, so this is very funny before this even starts. Remember, they've been coming to Pharaoh every time. Now that Moses has left, guess what Pharaoh does? Go get that guy. Go get him and Aaron, bring them back in here. And that's what he's doing. They're going to go retrieve him. Let's go ahead and read it. Someone read that, please.
So Moses and Aaron were brought again to Pharaoh, and he said to them, go serve the Lord your God. Who are the ones that are going? Moses said, we will go with our young and our old, with our sons and our daughters, with our flocks and our herds we will go. For we must hold a feast to the Lord. Then he said to them, the Lord had better be with you when I let you and your little ones go. Beware, for evil is ahead of you. Not so. Go now, you who are men, and serve the Lord, for that is what you desire. And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. Okay, thank you. So here's Pharaoh thinking, once again, he's in control.
Here he is. He's like, he basically told Moses, okay, have you made a decision? Who are you taking with you? We're taking everybody. And then he's like, no, you're not. You can take them in. And so he sends them out. Then he gives Moses a chance to say, Moses is just going to say, that ain't happening. That's not the way this is going to take place. So Pharaoh thinks, once again, this is a negotiating session. He's bargaining again. Think like negotiating, with foreign power today, the way it is. Terms of surrender, if you will. But God is not going to accept any terms at all. He's not accepting terms. Only unconditional, 100% surrender. Brethren, that's how things should be in this life. Even when we deal with wars and battles and everything, we need to understand that. That's what we see and realize what is here. Because if you do it at 98, 99%, guess what's going to happen probably a few years later? It's going to happen again, exactly right. You're not only doing two things, you're punishing evil, but you're also making an example. And that's what God is doing here in this process. in this moment. David, go ahead.
I was gonna say from a spiritual standpoint, you know, so many, and if we're honest, at times maybe we've done the same. We've tried to do things on our terms, and we look at it that way. You know, I want to be saved this way.
Right.
Instead of, you know, if you were a visual person, you could draw a column, and two columns, and you say God's terms and man's terms. You know, as far as how I want to be saved, and that's what we may some try to do. I want to be saved like the thief on the cross. I want to be saved just by saying a few words, you know, and so forth, instead of looking at what are God's terms. You know, we try to negotiate or bargain, you know, or it maybe is, even as a Christian, we may try to do the same thing as far as what it means to live a faithful life. We may try to bargain and say, well, I really don't have to be at services. You know, God will understand if I want to stay at home today when I could be here.
Right.
In other words.
Yeah. That's exactly right. It's so true. You know, I think about that's funny with the thief on the cross. If you say, I want to be like the thief on the cross. And I would say, you know, it's interesting. Nowhere in the Bible after that, do you ever hear the apostles say, just do like the thief? I mean, wouldn't that have been easy? I mean, they could have easily said that if that was true, just do like the thief did. Everybody knew what he was talking about if he said that, but he doesn't. Why? Because God gives the actual directions of what you're supposed to do. Because Jesus isn't on this earth to say, I forgive you. As he did back then. He could forgive sins, but you can't do that anymore. We see and understand that. So all this happened. So, you know, Pharaoh, towards the end, he's going to be begging he would have done that. Really begging he would have done it, and he doesn't. But I want you to notice something here which is really interesting. We see the difference here in Pharaoh's speech also. This word right here, Lord, and then where he uses it again one other time right here. This word Lord here actually means Yahweh, which is very interesting that he's using it, because Yahweh means the God. You know, God of, not just God of all gods, you know, a God, the only God, the one and only God, is what we see here, so it'd be unusual. And, you know, but really when it comes down to this, when we look at this and you start reading it and kind of break it down, it sounds more of a sarcastic way. Like, oh yeah, you know, the God, one only God, had better be with you. You know, I mean, that's kind of a sarcastic way that he's using this. And I think Pharaoh knows in the back of his mind that once they leave on this feast, of course, we've already said it, they're never coming back. So Pharaoh thinks, you know, he's putting down his foot, and he's like, I'm in charge, and this is the way it's going to be. It almost sounds like a child. When we see this happening, we obviously no intention of giving in, just going far enough to get rid of the pesky God. Pharaoh offers a compromise. Once again, just take them in and don't even take any animals. And Moses is going to show that's not right. You just can't be like this. And, you know, we think about this for us today. Here's very important. We're just talking about spiritually. You know, how often do we ever try to negotiate obedience with God? Brethren, you and I cannot negotiate obedience. We either do it or we don't. I mean, it's that simple. You know, I'll follow you, but let me hold on to this one part of my life. You know, I mean, we just can't be like that. God isn't interested, here it is, in half-hearted obedience. He's just not. He wants everything. And do you think that's too much for God to ask for? Do you think it's too much for him to ask for everything? Why does he have the right? Why does God have the right to ask for our full surrender towards him? Why does he have the right to do that?
He created us.
He had created us, everything was. But here's the other thing. Number one, we say, yeah, because God created. I figured that's what would be said without a doubt. Number two, as we see here and understand, is because God knows best for you and I. And what happens when we surrender to God, we are surrendering, guess what? We're surrendering and understanding, leading to what really is freedom. You know, even in our country, we say we're free. You know, how many here have paid taxes on your house? Anybody got your hand? Nobody? Am I the only one? You know, we all got to pay taxes on our house, right? I don't call that freedom. I remember when our country separated itself from Britain with the tea tax, so we're not paying taxes anymore, you know? And we see that. And there's so many things like that we see. If you visit another country, you know, I've visited Ghana, you know, several times, and you go over there and, you know, they really think they're free. And then you start seeing things, I'm like, sorry guys, this isn't free. You're on the right track. But still, what happens is leaders want to hold on to that little bit there. God allows us to get rid of all that. Because he says, don't worry about this world. Move on to what's going to be better and greater and a place after this. So as we look at this, I want to notice this time that Pharaoh drives Moses out, perhaps in retaliation for Moses storming out on his own, really, as we see this here. But what we understand is Moses is going to say, all right, that's what we want to do. Bring on the locusts. Let's do it. Let's go
Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, that they may come upon the land of Egypt and eat every herb of the land and all that the hail hath left. So Moses stretched out his rod over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought on an east wind on the land of all that day and all that night. When it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. And the locusts went over all the land of Egypt and rested on all the territory of Egypt. And they were very severe previously, and there were no such locusts as they, nor shall there be such after them. For they covered the face of the whole earth, so that the land was dark, and that they ate every herb of the land and all the fruit of the trees in which the hail had left. So they remained nothing green on the trees or on the plants of the field throughout all the land of Egypt.
Thank you. I want you to step back just a moment to the hell. After the hell's over, you think about what people are going to do. They're going to come outside. They're going to come outside and investigate. See what's there, and they're like, oh, wow, good. We have some of that fruit tree left. Oh, good. We have some of this vegetation over here that we can do. You know, and they're doing that. You know, thinking of what do they need to, get rid of and burn, and what can they keep. And, it's not going to last long, because here come the locusts. And what does it say? How much of the land, how much of the stuff that comes up out of the ground are they going to eat?
They didn't know all of it.
All of it. And we're probably thinking, how can that happen? The locusts are
That's what
pretty.
they are.
That's,
They're swarm.
they're swarming eaters. That's all they do is eat. That's exactly all they do. And I want you to catch something here, back to this verse here, as we see this here, you go back one, where it talks about, they've never seen anything like this before, ever. Any of the ancestors go all the way back, and there will never be anything like this again. So, in other words, what God is telling us here through Moses, this is the worst locust moment in the world history, in the history of the world. Well, I want to show you something. I want to show you something in 2020. In 2020, we have BBC, you understand they're, reported, they're British, reported that millions of locusts that were swarming over Mauritania, Senegal, Mali, Nigeria, and threatened to move southwards towards West Africa. The desert locusts, they can devour their own weight in food, 2 grams every 24 hours. So every single locust can eat enough food the size of their body every 24 hours. Now, I want you to think about it. He said they've never seen anything like this. Never will there ever be anything like this. So no matter what we look at, Egypt was worse. I want you to catch that. Look what it looked like in 2020. This is 2020 now. Look at locusts. This is all locusts, brother. Look at all this. Look how dark this is. That is a swarm of locusts right there that look like a black cloud that you find. Just look at this. It's just unreal. Unbelievable. And we would think that it's got to be the end of the world. People would think about it. This is it. That's the worst we've ever seen. No, there's been worse. In our lifetime, they say this is the worst, the biggest swarm that has ever been found, in the world. They forgot about Egypt. They forgot about Egypt. There was one even bigger. And we see that there. I want you to think about this. A ton of locusts, which is, I'll just say this, which is a very tiny part of the average swarm. A ton of locusts eats the same amount of food in a single day. Y'all ready for this? A ton of locusts. So here's a swarm, and you have a ton of this tiny bit, like right here in the swarm. They eat in one single day the same amount of food that 10 elephants, 25 camels, and 2,500 people would eat. Think about that for a moment. It's like, you got to be kidding me, Ernie. No, I'm not. That's how serious this is. Swarms can travel up to about 81 miles a day, eating everything in that 81-mile area. Some locust species have gotten up to be as long as 6 inches long. Think about that. 6 inches. And so this, I'm just wanting us to see here and understand when God sent these, He sent these for destruction. That's what it was. So one of the things about locusts is that they adapt to eat anything green. Sometimes they will attack only one kind of green, like rubber tree. They do that a lot in Africa, but they can and do eat absolutely everything in their path. There was worse, this was much worse than the hell. Much worse than hell. It's good now there's going to be nothing left at all. So God is painting a picture to come. Think about when you saw these swarms come up. It said it darkened the entire sky. Not as dark as they're about to feel. Not as dark at all. So let's continue to read. I'll read this almost at a time. Then Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron in haste. And notice, get him here quick! Get him, hurry! That's what he's doing. He's wanting them right away. I have sinned against the Lord and your God and against you. That's what he says. Now therefore, please forgive me my sin only this once. What an interesting word. You know, only this once. And, you know, if he really knew who God was, he'd be saying, forgive me for what? All my sins, every sin I've ever done. So, and he says, my sin only this once, and entreat the Lord your God. Now there where he says the Lord, he's not using Yahweh, he's back to the generic way again. It says that he may take away from me this death only. So he went out from him, Pharaoh, and entreated the Lord. And the Lord turned a very strong west wind, which took the locusts away and blew them to the Red Sea. You're like, wow, it actually worked this time. No, there remained no one locust in all the territory of Egypt, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the children of Israel go. First glance sounds like a great repentance, right? But it's not. We see this. What's that?
Worldly sorrow.
It was a worldly sorrow. That's all it was. He was sorry because of what has happened to his country. He is sorry because of what the locusts have done to, you know, their survival. He's not sorry for what he did. That's not what this is about. So, brethren, we need to understand when we think about this. People all the time would say, God, I'm so sorry. Or, God, do this for me and I promise I'll be a better Christian. God doesn't work that way. It's not how he works. So here we come to the plague of darkness, 21 to 29. Now I want you to look at this picture. This picture, we're like, it's pretty dark, isn't it? You see a little bit of a glow? That'd be coming from candles, you know, in their homes or little things here and there. Because someone would think, oh, do their candles work? Of course they can still light candles. They can light flames, they can do that. But it's not the same like it used to be is what they're getting at. Let me continue to read. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, darkness which may even be felt. So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt. Notice how many days? 3 days. They did not see one, and I love this 3 days because it has to get to the Passover. It's amazing how this works out. They did not see one another. What? Nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light, guess what? In their dwellings. So I want you to think about that for a moment. Just think about this as we see and what we find and what we understand as we see this. You know, this wasn't just an ordinary darkness. Has anybody ever been in a darkness where, I mean, you couldn't see any kind of, you know, any kind of light at all? I mean, not even a slip. You know, you get dark, turn out lights, close your eyes, and you know, and you open your eyes, you can still what? You still see a little bit. I mean, you could actually probably block a little bit like this, you know. But, you know, if you've ever been in caves, the rain caverns in Virginia or other caverns so on, and they turn out the lights, before they do it, they go grab something or hold on to somebody. Don't move at all when we get ready to do this. Stay where you are. And they turn out the lights. I did this. I couldn't even see my hand. I had to touch my face to make sure my hand was there. Couldn't see anything. That's the way this is. This says here in the verses that they felt the darkness. How do you feel darkness? Meaning you feel darkness is it's like claustrophobic. It just pulls you down of what is there. That's why it says they didn't even move for 3 days. They didn't even move. We see the difference in it. There, go ahead.
Is the sound working?
Yes, that's working perfect.
Okay.
Yep, it's working.
Mine stopped.
No, it's still working. I see it right here. So as we see this here, what's interesting, I just want to read some people will translate this pitch darkness. I love the Hebrew language. It's darkness of darkness. That's the way it's translated. Think about that for a moment. That's pretty dark. So as we see this coming to the very end, I'm going to jump through these real quick and get this last bit. We'll read this and we'll be done. The Pharaoh called Moses and said, go serve the Lord and let your flocks and your herds be kept back. Oh, hold on a minute. Did he actually just say that? Did he actually just say, hold your flocks back? Notice what he said, let your little ones also go with you. So you can take all the people, but you can't take what? Any animals. What do they need the animals for? Sacrifice. How many do they need? We don't know yet. Either does Moses. This is great what Moses says. Well, Moses said, you must also give us sacrifices, burnt offerings, that we may sacrifice the Lord our God. Our livestock is also shall go with us, not a hoof shall be left behind. For we must take some of them to serve the Lord our God. And even we do not know with what we must serve the Lord until we arrive there. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. And Pharaoh said to him, get away from me. Take the heed to yourself and see my face no more. For in the day you see my face, you shall die. Notice this next part. So Moses said, you have spoken well. I will never see your face again. I want you to think about that for a moment. When he left there, did Pharaoh think, oh, I won. This guy's going to walk off over here and he's going to die. No. Moses knows. I'll never see you again, because what's about to happen next, you're gonna beg us to leave. You're gonna pay us to leave. And that's exactly what happens. And we'll end there. Any comments before we close for the morning? We're out of time. Anybody else? Nope, all right. I'll just say this right here, think about this last comment. God always finishes what he starts. Always finishes what he starts. He's not gonna give in here. He's gonna get his way. And he'll do that. All right, thank you, appreciate your time. All right, done.